One of the issues I've been confronted with over the last 3 to 4 weeks has been around how one responds when someone has endeavoured to paint you as a person who is completely opposite to the way that you view yourself. Last night I was watching a session on the BBC Panorama program, which was talking about social media and how women in particular are attacked in horrific ways by people on social media, particularly women who have a reputation of some description. They've either been on a TV show, reality TV show for example, or they are female journalists, and how they're not attacked for their ideas, they're attacked in the most brutal and horrifying ways in terms of their body shape, in terms of the language that's used to describe these women, and just the language generally, I guess, that is used. It's appalling. Now, recently I've had an attack by a person who I was working with in an organisation that I run. Now, I'm not going to mention names, no point in all of that, because I really wanted to talk about how this situation had impacted me. Now, firstly, as you're aware, I'm a male, and secondly, the person who did the attacking was a female. Now, that created a number of issues. The first was that I didn't want to refer to this woman in a derogatory way. I didn't want to attack her regardless of the attacks that were levelled at me. I simply wanted to find a way to initially work with her, negotiate with her ways by which we could work together, because I valued the type of, I guess I was going to say person, but that's not true as it turned out, but I certainly valued the skill set that she came with and the benefit that that would have caused the organisation. So I wanted to focus on those issues, but as time went by, it became more and more impossible to do so. All of this came about because I endeavoured to discuss with her a very deep-held belief I have about being betrayed. There have been a number of people, fortunately not all that many, but there certainly have been some people in my life who have betrayed me. Now, what I've done in the last time I was betrayed, I decided that I just wouldn't have anything to do with that person at all. And while discussing this issue with this woman who was volunteering my organisation, she believed for some reason that I was attacking her around betrayal. I wasn't. It was completely misread. I've had the same discussion with many other people and they didn't think the same. So it tended to exacerbate itself over time, and the attacks became more and more focused. They became more about who I was as a person, that I was a terrible person, and that my behaviour in terms of some of the decisions that I'd make, or the fact that I didn't act quick enough according to her, meant that I was the most terrible person on the face of this earth. And when it really did get me was when she suggested that I shouldn't be a social worker. Now, the point I wanted to make really this time is that it doesn't matter the sex of the person or whatever, the sex of the person who is being victimised or the sex of the person who is doing the assaulting. Now, what I do want to discuss though is the way it impacts people. And this is gender completely put out of it. And I'm just going to talk about how it impacts me. And I know from the Panorama documentary that I watched last night that also it impacts people of other genders the same. And I guess it didn't hit me until the other day, and my wife had mentioned to me how traumatic the last 3 to 4 weeks had been for me. In the meantime, I had taken a break. There was Easter, I went away. with my wife, met up with my grandchildren and my daughter, and had an enjoyable time. But it was like the incessant bombardment of negative emails and so on about me was tiring. It was wearying. In fact, I found myself becoming very, very tired. Initially, I found that I couldn't sleep, that I kept on wondering, am I the person that this person is trying to describe? I'm trying to justify who I am, like I was querying my own values, my own sense of self as a result. And then I started to wonder who this person was that could possibly provide this incredible insight into me, because this person really didn't know me. She'd only been working directly with us for a couple of months. So why did this happen? What sort of things, what does it say about me, I guess, that would allow myself to doubt who I am and to cause myself to enter into a state of depression, if you like, and a state of trauma because of what someone else is saying about me? Well, one of the reasons was that this person was busily trying to influence other people in my organisation, and I therefore was concerned at some point whether that was absolutely possible. There was a part of me that didn't believe it was going to happen, that it was evident from her behaviour that there were certain issues that she had that she herself hadn't resolved, and that she was projecting some of those issues onto me. But nevertheless, I tended to take those beliefs on about me. So some of the things that were being said made me question myself. Now, I know that I'm not perfect by any means. I make mistakes and I delay things, and sometimes I don't do things in a timely manner. I get all of that. That there are faults that I have that I certainly need to address. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to address them, and I have started to do so. But it's not about the faults necessarily, because someone can say to you, look, there's a way by which you behave that I find unhelpful. And I would say, if that's to me, well, you let me know specifically what the behaviour is, and I simply won't do it again. For me, it's as simple as that. I will address that. And if it's something I can address, if it's something as bizarre as, I talk with a low-pitched or a high-pitched voice, I think I find that difficult to change. But if it's a direct behaviour that I'm responsible for and it's offending someone else, then I would change that. And I would advise any of you who are experiencing the same thing to look at those behaviours, how they impact other people, and to change them. There was nothing necessarily about the allegations made against me by this particular person that made me think that there was anything in my behaviour that necessarily needed to be changed. If you've got an issue with somebody and you wish to have that issue addressed, you don't take it public in order to address it. A reasonable person will confront that person with the behaviour that they don't like and tell them how that behaviour impacts them, and then ask that person to change the behaviour. If the person chooses not to change that behaviour, not to listen to you in terms of how that's impacting you, then you have a problem, and you probably shouldn't have an association with that person, no matter who they are. But I believe I'm at least capable of addressing those issues, because I don't want to hurt anybody. But why is it then that someone would choose to hurt you? One of the things that I had to consider was that this was a woman. Now, gender should not play a part, but I am very conscious of the fact that I've worked with many women who are in DV relationships where the other person in the relationship would call them crazy, would identify mental well-being problems as the problem, right, and that used that as a form of coercive control. And there was no way in the world I was going to enter into that sort of argument. I'm not one to define whether or not she has a mental well-being problem or not. That's not up to me, and it's probably not even relevant, to be quite honest. What was relevant was the fact that I needed to not use that sort of language to identify what the problem was. So why am I having this conversation with you? Because I think all of us, from time to time, are confronted by these sort of circumstances where someone, for unknown reasons, hates you for a particular for a particular reason that often's got nothing to do with you. I can remember years ago I had a guy who despised me because I chose to work with his, I've had a few of these actually, not just the one, but in particular this particular guy chose to hate me and say some terrible things to me about me on social media, and eventually I had to delete him from all my social media sites because I had chosen to work with his ex-wife and a couple of his stepchildren, and it was evident that he was an abusive individual, and that was evident because of the way he also chose to abuse me. He validated what I'd already been told about him from those other people that had been in his life. Now, I'm not in a position to judge, I prefer not to be in a position to judge people based on their mental well-being issues. If the people want to find a way to address them, that's fabulous, go to it, do that, address those issues. But in this particular instance, I had to find a way to deal with it in a practical sense. Now, the practical thing I did was this: I simply didn't respond. No matter what was said, no matter the myriad of emails, the tens, seems like hundreds there weren't, but there were many emails that came one after another about how terrible I was. And by not responding, I realised I wasn't going to inflame the situation. Neither could I be responsible for saying something that could be misread and used against me later on. So my warning to all of you is that if you have someone who is confronting you, who is saying things about you that you know are not true, the best way to deal with that is not to respond. It is tempting, I know, and there are things I would have loved to have said deep down, but I chose not to because I didn't think that that would be at all productive, and I know it wouldn't have been. So don't say anything, just shut up, is my suggestion to all of you. The other thing that was important was to check with others to see how widespread the allegations were, and I discovered that there were conversations having with other people, and I became aware, and suspected it anyway, that this particular person was trying to collude with others about her version of who I was, and hoping that she would be able to win over that support and get rid of me from the organisation. Fortunately, that didn't happen, simply because the people within the organisation had been with me for years. They knew who I was and understood basically who I was, and that what the things that she was saying as she escalated the comments, it was evident that she was the one who was causing the harassment and the bullying. And it was fascinating to me that where some of the allegations levelled at me were about harassment and bullying, making statements which I didn't make, suggesting that I made phone calls that I didn't make, and suggesting that I said things that I didn't say. And eventually it became evident that this person was doing the harassing and the bullying. And because I chose not to do anything, it became more and more evident that this is precisely what this person is doing. If you have somebody who's attacking you all the time, that person often wants the attention from you. Now, whatever the reasons are for that, and I'm not clear what they are, perhaps negative attention is better than no attention at all, that it makes them feel important, makes them feel valued perhaps. But if a person is being negative to you, then really that person should not be in your life. End of story. It's my betrayal story. Betrayal is a very strong emotion that I've chosen. If people betray me in some way, that is people I've trusted in the past, and they do things that destroy that trust, therefore betray me, then I make a decision not to have that person in my life again in any form. And so I guess it's important for us to be able to understand that a person may choose to attack us, not because of anything that we do, but because of certain things we represent. And I'm not going to go into what I believe I represent to this particular person I'm talking about. But it's important to understand that if we hold certain positions, if we hold certain values or beliefs, some people will object to that. If we hold an ideology, for example, that other people disagree with, then they will try and find ways to attack us. The best way to deal with that is not to respond to those attacks, to accept them as being spurious, as being unhelpful, and being negative, but realising that they shouldn't have any impact on you. That you, whatever your beliefs are, and if you believe in that, they should always remain intact. It was unfortunate that I started to doubt my own beliefs about who I was, because in my life there'd been a number of events for which I wasn't responsible for, I don't think, where people have betrayed me. So, and sometimes I kind of set myself up into positions where I've become authoritative, I guess, in terms of some of the ideas I believe in, and I wouldn't shift from those ways of thinking because they were in tune with my own values. So I think that sometimes we need to, we could reevaluate our values and our beliefs and say, well, maybe they can be adjusted. Sometimes we just need to accept that other people have a different perspective than us, and so be it. It doesn't mean they're bad people. They just have a different idea as to what should or should not be done. We might disagree with that, and we might just say, well, at the end of the day, we just got to agree to disagree, but it doesn't mean it should harm our relationship. We're just different people. So there are different things that we can do in order to mitigate against the harm that this does to our own sense of self. And I think that's the lesson I've learned, is that there are things that we can do to ensure that we're caring for ourselves when people are hating upon us. Because the hate is really about us. You know, if we say something ourselves that is hateful, that is vengeful, that is punitive, that is designed to hurt somebody else, then certainly, you know, we can't sit back and say, well, okay, we have a clean skin, no one can attack us. I think if you do those types of things, you're open to attack. And I've had to evaluate my criticism of my colleagues, social workers within the child protection system, because I'm often critical of them. I'm not critical of the person, I'm critical of the practice. So I'm critical of behaviours that inform their practice about how to work with families and children. To some people, though, that appears to be critical of them. It isn't. If someone wants to criticise what I'm doing in my practice, that's fine. I'm more than happy to look at it without feeling aggrieved because of that. It's a critique. I accept critiques. I don't accept bad language, talking to me in a derogatory way, putting me down, trying to make me feel lesser than them, and having some sort of power and control over me. I don't accept that. And neither should you. The reality is that we should be able to understand what people are saying, see it for what it is, and manage it in accordance with that. Now, I hope that this conversation has been helpful to you. If you wish to have me comment on it, please comment down below. If you wish to have a conversation with me, feel free to email me. I'll put that information down below. And if someone chooses to not like you, just remember that the way they think about you often has more to do with them than it ever will with you. Thanks everybody for being with me.